This is the St Bernard's Well. It sits here on the banks of the Water of Leith, running just north of Edinburgh city centre. I could go into detail about the history of the sculpture from an artistic point of view, but the well has an important link to football in the capital. Edinburgh is most well known for being the home of Hearts and Hibs, but up until World War II, the city had a third side that was competitive in the early years of Scottish football. As you can guess by the intro, this club was called St Bernard's, and they were for a long period the third team in Edinburgh, but they haven't existed for 70 years now. So in this video, we'll be looking at how they came about, their glory days, and how a seemingly successful club would come to fold. St Bernard's, like many clubs, weren't originally founded as a football club, but instead started out as a rugby club, with their earliest matches dating back to 1876. In 1878, they would merge with another rugby club called United FC, who had an association football division, and so they would come under the St Bernard's name. The club started playing games at the Meadows in the south side area of Edinburgh, which they shared with both Hearts and Hibs before moving to various other grounds around the city, before eventually settling at the Royal Patent Gymnasium grounds. The club was involved in discussions about creating a national football league, but weren't elected to the league when it started in 1890. 1890 would get worse for them, as just like Renton, St Bernard's would be expelled from playing competitive games due to the payment of players. The two clubs would later be stripped of their SFA membership due to playing an unauthorised friendly against each other, but would soon regain their memberships, and St Bernard's would join the Football League in 1893. They would start off strong, with what would be their best times as a club coming at this time. In their first season, they would finish in third place, 6 points off the title, and 3 behind Edinburgh rivals Hearts. The next year would see increased success for the club. Whilst they would only finish 6th in the league, they went on to win the Scottish Cup, where they beat Hearts in the semi-final and Renton in the final. The next season, they would end up in another cup semi-final, but would be defeated by Hearts in a case of revenge from the previous year. But these 3 years are as good as it would get for St Bernard's. With the growth that Hibs and Hearts were seeing, St Bernard's weren't able to keep up, meaning they had less money to pay their players compared to their Edinburgh rivals. Of the squad that won the Scottish Cup, the next year they only had 5 of them still at the club, as the other clubs in Scotland and down south in England were more enticing for players thanks to being offered better wages. This would see the club fall into becoming a second division club rather than a first division club, and their main financial backer, William Lapsley, would be killed in a crash involving his horse-drawn cab. The next issue for the club would come in the form of World War I, as their ground would get taken over by the military, leaving the pitch in such a state that they couldn't play there when the war ended. This led to a legal case against the military demanding compensation for the damages, and the club would not return to their ground until 1924. They also came back to the Scottish Football League not letting them back in, meaning they had to play in the non-leagues for a few seasons before being re-elected in 1921. The end of the 1920s would see the Great Depression hit Scotland, and many clubs would suffer, but St Bernard's would thrive through a unique manner. Due to their connections not only with the Royal Gymnasium and the factory owners on the board of directors, the club would swoop up the best unemployed players, as they would also be offered employment in the area, which gave them a huge advantage in recruiting players compared to other smaller clubs. As the 1930s came around, the club would try and find a way to keep their advantage over the smaller clubs by trying to get more fans through the door. They would do this by implementing an incredibly attacking style of football, with mixed success. Whilst they would concede more goals than their rivals, in the words of Lawrence Sankland, hunners and hunners of goals would flow. Literally, they scored 103 goals in the 1934-35 season, 106 in 35-36, and 100 in the 36-37 season. 3 consecutive seasons of triple-digit goals may be exciting, but they weren't getting the results needed to earn promotion, with 2 third-place finishes being the closest they would get to returning to the top flight. As the 30s came to a close, the club started to drop down to being a mid-table club, but would make a Scottish Cup semi-final in 1938, which after taking the game to a second replay, there was no extra time or penalties back then, they just kept replaying until a winner would prevail. They would be defeated by eventual winners East Fife. Their home game was played at Tynecastle and would see a club record attendance of just over 35,000. What would seem like a hopeful future would be curtailed by yet another world war. But football would still continue, as due to restrictions on needless travel, Scottish football would be regionalised. This would initially seem great for St Bernard's. Regular games against local rivals Hibs and Hearts would be beneficial for the club's finances and would more than likely see the club through the war. Or so they thought. The Eastern League that St Bernard's were meant to be in would be scuppered by Aberdeen, requesting the league be shut down, due to Hibs and Hearts being put in the same league as Celtic and Rangers, because Scottish football is an excellent example of common sense. Whilst an Eastern League would come about in 1942, this would be the only season they would compete in. On the 16th of May 1942, they would play what would become their final game, a 3-2 defeat at home to East Fife. The original plan was for the club to be mothballed until the war ended, but with the death of another director, financial issues would unfold, as he had given a loan to the club that those in the will demanded be paid back. This meant they had to sell their only asset, the Royal Gymnasium ground. At the end of the war, the club attempted to enter the Scottish Qualification Cup, but never played. They tried getting a ground share with Leith Athletic, but were refused, and despite the resurrection of youth clubs, the senior side would never return. So what remains of St Bernard's? Well, the old ground of the Royal Gymnasium can be visited. Sort of. As you can see in this footage, it is currently a construction site next to the King George V Park in Stocksbridge. At the Royal Crescent entrance at the top of the hill, there is a sign with some information about the club as a reminder of what was once there. There was an amateur team of the same name that played in the local Saturday leagues, but they folded back in 2018. They did, however, manage to win an East of Scotland Amateur Cup in their final season. Unfortunately, that's all that can be found of them. There are claims of boys' clubs and the Edinburgh primary schools competing in a St Bernard's Cup, but I couldn't find anything about these concrete information. So if you do have any idea about these, please leave information in the comments below. That's all for this video. I hope you did enjoy it. I have experimented a bit with the inclusion of on-site filming. Hopefully it's integrated well, as if I can, then I will try and implement it again. The usual requests of liking, sharing and subscribing are appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.